Okay, last week we started a new series, for those of you who were here. And I'm really proud of the title of the series. We thought of it for a while, and we're really proud of what it is. It's The 4 Destructive Habits of Highly Dysfunctional People. We sat and brainstormed that one for a while. It's kind of like our crown jewel of sermon titles. The 4 Destructive Habits of Highly Dysfunctional People. And last week we looked at habit number 1. Which was, as my dad, Pastor Rick, pointed out, an unmanaged tongue. It's the whole idea that our tongues, the things we say, have an incredible amount of power. We have the ability to build people up, to encourage people, and we also have equal ability to tear people down and really put scars on their egos and personalities and lives that can last for a very long time. And so it becomes very, very important that we manage the things we say and realize that we have the power to destroy and we have the power to build up with the things we say. So that was number 1. This week, we're going to look at something that is every bit as dangerous as that first one. Every bit as dangerous, but I guess in some ways you could say it's even scarier, because really it's something that I think all of us do to some extent and don't even realize that we do it. And so, in that regard, it's pretty scary. The thing to be most scared of is the thing you don't even know is there. This is something, the thing we're talking about this morning, something that lies at the very roots of our culture today. A few weeks back, some of you will remember we talked about materialism, how this culture is controlled by its desire for money and material goods and all that stuff. This thing we're going to talk about this morning is even deeper than materialism and the roots of our culture. Really, you could say that materialism is an expression of this thing we're going to be talking about. Are you ready to hear what it is? Number 2, the number 2 destructive habit of highly dysfunctional people is an obsession with feeling good. An obsession with feeling good. And I want you right now, as I begin to go on explaining what this means and what this looks like, I want you to start looking at your own lives and seeing if that's in there in any extent, because that's going to become important as we go on. But the fact is, we live in a culture today, and I think a lot of you will know what I mean when I say this. We live in a culture today that is dominated by the obsession to feel good all the time. You gotta feel good all the time. And again, I hope we can try to relate to this here and see where it is in our own lives. But I mean, really, I don't think it's that hard to relate to, because we want to feel good, right? I mean, is there anyone here that doesn't want to feel good? Is there anyone here that doesn't want to enjoy themselves? Is pleasure like wicked? I really don't like pleasure. No, human beings want to feel good. They want to experience pleasure. It's just what they are. It's how they work. Whatever the outlet is, and we have a whole lot of outlets. Whatever the outlet is, we go there to try to feel good. And in this culture, there's a ton of them. But for any of you, is sports your outlet? Running or exercise? I got 3, 4 hands. Let's get more relatable here. How about television? Television, entertainment, movies, music. I see the same hand, like the same person raised his hand. I'm looking at you, Jordan Kelly. Music, I really love music. I can sit down and listen to music and all my worries fade away. Oh wait, how about this one? This is really good. Food. Food, I think, if you're not raising your hand, I don't believe you. Everybody loves food. It's amazing. There's so many different types, so much variety of pleasure you can have with food. In this culture, there's a ton of it. Whether it's food, television, sex, alcohol, drugs, whatever it is, this culture is all about feeling good. You gotta feel good. Now, before I go forward, I really want to make this point, and I'm going to reiterate this over and over again, because I do not want you to walk away saying, well, Pastor Nate told me this. Is it a bad thing to feel good? Are those things I just mentioned evil in and of themselves, necessarily? Is food bad? No, it's food. It's great. I love food. Savannah and I, at the end of a day, really love to sit down and watch a TV show together. At the end of a work day, we just love to sit down and watch a show together. It's not bad. It's great. Is it bad to feel pleasure? Is it evil to enjoy yourself? Believe it or not, there are some who in the history of the church would say, yes, it is. It's the whole Gnosticism thing for any of you who are familiar with philosophy, which would say that the material is wicked and all material pleasure and all this stuff is evil at its core. But no, the fact is, God created us as human beings with the ability to feel good. And furthermore, he surrounded us with things that make us feel good. I mean, food is delicious for a reason. We're surrounded by things that help us to enjoy life. I think God wants us to enjoy life. It's not wrong to feel good. It's not even wrong to want to feel good. The problem comes with something else. The problem comes with taking feeling good and pleasure and putting it somewhere it doesn't belong. Because in this culture, and I think you'll agree with me, in this culture, we've made feeling good the end-all of existence. We've made pleasure and enjoyment and feeling good the reason for living. That's what the end-all of existence means. It's the reason for existing. That's why you get up in the morning. That's why you go to your job, so you can make money, so you can feel good later, right? It's all about feeling good. And in this culture, it's not just an aspect of life. It is life. This is what life is all about. This is why you live. So again, this culture is dominated by that. Question, is this a new thing? Is this like a new phenomenon? In the last 50 years, people want to feel good? No. How many of you are familiar with philosophy at one level or another? Worldviews, that sort of thing? How many of you have heard of the term hedonism? Not heathenism, hedonism with a D. Hedonism is the philosophical worldview that basically says man's meaning in life is to get as much of that feeling good as he possibly can before he dies. And that is your purpose, that is your meaning, that's why you exist. Maximize the pleasure, minimize the pain. That's hedonism. And this thing isn't like a new philosophy that's come about in the last 100 years or so. You can trace the beginnings of this, and allow me to go into nerd mode for a moment here because I really like this stuff. You can trace the beginnings. This is ancient Greek stuff here. How many of you heard of Epicurus, the Epicurean movement? Those are his followers. His whole thing, and he lived about 300 years before Christ was born. So we're getting into the BCs now. 300 years before Christ was born, and he was teaching that the purpose of life is to maximize pleasure and minimize the amount of pain you experience. And that's it. That's what life is. If you can go through life experiencing mostly just pleasure and not a lot of pain, you've won. You've succeeded in life. And then you die, and that's it. But that's what life is all about, according to these guys. That's hedonism. And this has been a movement that formally, as the idea of hedonism, it's been around for over 2,000 years. It's been around for a while. This isn't anything new. And in Greek culture, they had a phrase, the Epicureans and the Stoics had a phrase that I think some of you might find sound like something you've heard before. It was this: eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. You ever heard that before? Now, it doesn't literally mean we're going to die tomorrow. That would be kind of like a really scary thing to say. What it means is we are temporal beings. We're all going to die someday. Some of us, it'll be soon. We have a few years to live on this earth, so live it up. Fill yourself with every pleasure you can possibly experience before you die, because that's all that's going to matter. That's all that matters at all. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. There's a phrase that's gotten really popular in youth culture over the last year or so that's really similar. I see some of the youngins cringing at me because I'm about to actually say this in front of a bunch of people. One of those words I never thought I'd use in a sermon, believe it or not. How many of you have heard of the term YOLO? YOLO. Some of you are like, never heard the term YOLO. YOLO. Y-O-L-O. YOLO. YOLO. Not yo-yo. YOLO. How do you know what that means? It's you only live once. And that's something that's become very popular in youth culture today. Actually, I saw like a guy who was at least 50 years old yesterday wearing a neon yellow YOLO shirt. I was like, I don't think you should be wearing that shirt. It's become very popular in this culture. or in youth culture anyway. YOLO, this is the thing, you only live once, and it means exactly the same thing as this whole hedonism mantra. It's, you have one life to live. We're all going to die, so you better fill up that short time you have on earth with as much pleasure as you can possibly fill yourself up with. Everything you can experience, go and experience it because you only live once. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. It's the same thing we've been seeing for literally thousands of years. There is no change here. There's truly nothing new under the sun. And this is what's captured our culture today. And whether we know it or not, the youth culture has actually, the term for it. YOLO, as they go 100 miles an hour down the highway and get pulled over. YOLO, they cry as they enter into the courtroom to receive their sentencing. Whatever it is, whether you say it or not, this culture is dominated by that idea. We have a life, and pleasure is enjoyable, so I'm going to fill myself up with that before I die, because when I die, that's it. You only live once. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. This culture, our society, it's just everywhere. We are a feel-good society at its core. Everything is about feeling good, and if it don't make you feel good, get away from it, right? Makes you feel good? Great. You have a place here in society. Makes you feel bad? Nah, I'll go to someone else who'll make me feel good, right? Coincidentally, this is why I believe divorce is so common in the society. Because the moment the rubber meets the road, and you know what? This relationship really isn't making me feel as good as it did a month ago. I'm suddenly seeing some flaws. I'm going to find someone else who will make me feel good again. The marriage ended. It's very sad, and it is everywhere in our culture, and I really think that it's so deeply rooted that we don't even notice it's there. That often we just assume that this is the way it is. This is just how it is. Everybody lives like this because everyone does live like this in this culture. I mentioned this when I talked about materialism a few weeks back, but I think companies, big business, knows very, very well that we have this obsession with feeling good. Because if you look at advertisements, what are they all geared towards? Making you feel good, right? What is the name of the new fries they have at Burger King? Satis fries. I find it really hard to believe that it took people that long to make the word play between satisfy and fry. Satis fries, implying, you want to feel good? I got a French fry for you, man. Satis fries, because they satisfy. Awful. I mentioned this a few weeks back when we talked about materialism, but I saw a car commercial not too long ago. I think it was Lexus. And the tagline was like, they didn't even bother dressing it up. They said, makes you feel good. That was the tagline. That was it. Makes you feel good. You want to feel good? Buy our car. And then you'll feel good. Then you're living life. It's this whole idea. You have one life to live. Eat, drink, be merry, buy yourself a Lexus, buy yourself a box of Satis fries, and you're living life. You've got your meaning, you've got your purpose, you're doing it, man. It's really depressing if you sit and think about it for a moment. Because at the end of life, what you have are some experiences, and that's it. We're going to get to watch a video coming up that's going to really illustrate that. But this is what's crazy. It's even in the church. We don't even recognize it. This obsession with feeling good it's even in the church. One of my favorite authors, Dallas Willard, was reading a book of his recently. He made a point that really kind of shook me up. He made the point that the most common standard for whether a church service has gone well or not, whether a church service was really good or not, is whether you felt good in it and after it. Think about that for a second. When does a church service, that church service went really well. The worship went well. The message went well. The whole thing went really well. It's the ones that made you feel good. The one that made you feel good while you were in it, made you feel good after you left. I felt good. I'm going to come back. You ever heard of church consumerism? It's the whole idea where you say, okay, I'm going to go to this church. Wow, they make me feel good. A couple months later, the music's not making me feel as good as it did. The messages are kind of bothering my conscience a little bit. I'm not feeling so good. I'm going to go find another church that'll make me feel better. That's all over the place. It's like shopping around for the church that'll make you feel best. We should just make our tagline, Life Church Jensen Beach makes you feel good. You want to be satisfied? come here, satisfies. I can't get over that. It's all over our culture. It really is. And again, I encourage you to try to be thinking in terms of recognizing this, not just around you, but in your own lives as we go on here. But the fact is, believe it or not, Scripture has a lot to say on this matter. There's a lot to say, and I've picked out two of my favorite statements it makes. How many of you have read Ecclesiastes, that weird little book in the Old Testament? It really is kind of one of the more unique books in the Bible. It's really interesting. You have a guy who he's making a very strong point, and he's role-playing different roles and like in his writing to make points. It's very interesting style of writing. You don't see it a lot in Hebrew literature. But in Ecclesiastes 2, he plays the role of a man who lived the hedonist's life, who lived the life of obsession with feeling good. And he says this. He says, "Whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, it was all in vain, and there was nothing to be gained." This is a man who lived a whole life of obsession with feeling good, obsession with pleasure, and looks back on it and says, there wasn't anything there. I lived my whole life for that, and there wasn't anything to be gained at all. Paul, the Apostle Paul, in writing to his disciple Timothy, a letter to Timothy in 1 Timothy, he refers to those who, what he calls, give their whole lives over to wanton pleasure. He's talking about them, and he says, he makes a really strong statement. He says, they're dead even as they live. You hear that? In other words, there's no real life and a life lived for pleasure alone, because that's not where life is found. That's a part of life, but it's not life itself. And so the big problem with this, and I hope at this point we've begun to recognize that it's there, and hopefully begun to see parts of it in our own lives. If it's not in your life, great, but I haven't met anybody who hasn't struggled with this, at least to some degree. The big problem with this, and having this in your life, the reason why you can call it a destructive habit of highly dysfunctional people, is because often the obsession with feeling good becomes what you call an idol. An idol. It's kind of a church term, but I'll explain what that means. Whatever your idol is, takes priority over everything else. Your priorities are wrapped up in your idol, so everything underneath that falls to the wayside when you come to a crossroads. I'll explain what I mean. Often, without even knowing it, and I've seen this over and over, I've seen it in my own life and recognize it after years. Oh, I cannot believe I've been doing that. Often we put our priorities in feeling good, and our feeling good. Our idol is wrapped up in that. And so sometimes it's not a big deal. Sometimes you can be the good coworker, you can be a good husband or a good wife, you can be the father or the mother you need to be. You can act as you need to while you have this obsession with feeling good, while your priorities are wrapped up in that whole thing. But often, and I've seen this in my own life over and over again, often you'll come to an impasse. You'll come to a crossroads where there's a decision before you where you need to help out that coworker that really, really needs a break. You need to sit down with your wife and have that conversation that's going to require a lot of sacrifice. You need to sit down with your son or your daughter and spend time with them when you don't have any time. You'll come to these things where a decision that really needs to be made that requires sacrifice. That's not really going to make you feel good. And when your priorities are wrapped up in your feeling good and you come to this impasse, every single time you're going to choose the wrong way. You see what I'm saying? I've seen this in my life over and over again. I come to the crossroads because what I really care about is I want to feel good. I don't want to experience sacrifice and pain. And I hit the point where my son Titus really needs me to carry him around at 3 a.m. That kind of thing. What do I want? Do I want to feel good, or do I need to do what needs to be done for my son? And when your priorities are wrapped up in your feeling good, everything else is going to suffer. Eventually, it's going to fall by the wayside. That's just how it is. That's how idols work. That's how priorities work. it becomes extremely important to put your priorities in the right place, because things really begin to get rocky when they're not. There are things that matter, and there are things that are nice. And when your priorities are on the things that are nice, the things that matter begin to fall to the wayside. I want to reiterate, and I said I'd do this, but please don't go walking out of here saying, Nate told me it's bad to feel good, that I shouldn't watch TV, that I shouldn't listen to music, that I shouldn't play sports anymore. I'm not saying that. I love all those things. It is not wrong to feel good. It isn't. It's good to feel good. It's fine to feel good. God made us with the ability to feel good. That's great. The problem hits when you put your priority on feeling good. When that is what you live for. And that is what our culture is right now. And we are affected by our surroundings in ways we don't even understand. And something else I've noticed, that those who live a life of obsession with feeling good tend to never really develop too much. It always amazes me, those people I knew in high school who were the party animal types, the ones that were constantly doing something, just filling themselves up with something to make them feel good. 10 years later, they're the exact same person, doing the exact same things, struggling with the exact same problems. You can't, this is kind of a cheesy analogy, but I think it has some truth. If you spend your whole life in the shallow end of a pool, you're never going to learn how to swim. And again, cheesy overused, but I think it has some serious truth to it. You live your life consumed with enjoyment and pleasure and feeling good, you're never going to develop. And that means as a person, that means as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a mother, whatever it is, as a Christian. The idea of delayed gratification is very real. Sometimes sacrifice is required to get to the thing that really matters. How many of you have, again, those of you who are familiar with philosophy, how many of you have heard of the hedonistic paradox? There's a philosophical phenomena that I've seen in hedonism that hedonists pointed out originally. But it's this problem where the hedonist is unable to reach the pleasure he desires by seeking it. In other words, if pleasure is your priority, it doesn't seem like you're able to quite get there by seeking that as your priority. It's really interesting. Again, you can look it up. It's called the hedonistic paradox. But the idea is you can't get there by seeking pleasure as the end in itself. It was Hugo L. Black, a man who was prominent in our government like 80 years ago. He said, "It is the paradox of life that the way to pleasure is to seek it first. The very first condition of lasting happiness is that a life should be full of purpose, aiming at something outside self." That is profound, and that's true. It was John D. Rockefeller, a famous entrepreneur and philanthropist, who said, "I can think of nothing less pleasurable than a life devoted to pleasure." And that's a fact. Those who live lives that are devoted to pleasure, those who live with the obsession of feeling good, that is their priority, you end up not feeling very good pretty quick. That's inevitable. Jesus in Matthew 6 talks about the idea of building up your treasures in heaven, and this is what he's talking about. And there are things that are very, very weighty. There are things that are worthwhile. There are things that matter. There are things that will last. So again, my encouragement is put your priorities on things that matter, because it can be all too easy to put them on things that really don't. And again, I want to say, it isn't bad to feel good. It's fine. It's great. I love feeling good. We all love feeling good. We're human beings. But be very careful to put your priorities on the things that matter, because otherwise the things that matter will begin to fall by the wayside. So whether it's right here as I'm speaking, whether it's when you go home today, whether it's in the car on your drive home, I would ask that all of us take a moment to examine ourselves, to look at our own lives and how we're living it and where our priorities are. take a close look to see if our priorities are on feeling good or pleasure or enjoyment as opposed to the things that matter a whole lot more. So I'm going to pray as we have the band come up here and close out this morning. But Father, I want to be able to look back at my life and say that was a life very well spent. That was a life lived developing and investing towards things that matter. And it can be really hard to find a balance between having enjoyment in your life and living towards things that are truly, truly important. But God, I pray you'd help us to find it. If there are areas in our lives where our priorities are off, Father, please show us. Because I think I can speak for all of us when I say that we don't want to sow into things that just don't matter all that much. We love you, Lord. Amen.